Ibrahim Traoré warned that foreign powers are pressuring one member of the Alliance of Sahel states to betray the others. He said that foreign powers were pushing hard to fracture the regional bloc formed by Burkina Faso, Mali, and...
On April 16, 2025, a coup attempt came terrifyingly close to bringing down Burkina Faso's government. 6 men, some in uniform, some in hiding, planned to storm the presidency, collapse the state, and hand power to foreign hands. But who were they? How did they infiltrate the system? And why did they want to destroy the very revolution that promised freedom? Let's find out. They didn't come crashing through the palace gates. They didn't shout slogans or raise flags. Instead, they whispered. They plotted. They smiled during briefings and saluted during roll calls. These were not rebels hiding in the forest. These were men who understood the system from the inside, because they were part of it. That's what made the betrayal so dangerous. It wasn't just an attack. It was a carefully sharpened knife slipped beneath the skin of the state. When Captain Ibrahim Traoré revealed their names, it wasn't just a press statement. It was a warning shot to the entire nation. Your enemies are not just out there. Some are sitting beside you. Each man named had a different past, a different face, a different rank, but they were bound by one common thread: a willingness to burn the house down to take the throne. Their resumes were impressive, their roles trusted, their access unrestricted. But underneath the medals and mission records was something colder: the belief that Traoré's vision for Burkina Faso had to be stopped, not by reason or debate, but by force. What makes this even more chilling is the diversity of their infiltration. This wasn't a single faction or unit gone rogue. It was a web woven across ranks, geographies, and even belief systems. One man was still operating inside a national security center. Another had vanished from his post abroad, reappearing in a foreign capital. Others had quietly drifted out of uniform years ago, but their loyalties had never truly left the battlefield. They had one foot in the army and another in the shadows. They were planners, recruiters, manipulators, and some, we would later learn, had contacts that stretched far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. But what pushed them over the edge? What made soldiers, trained to protect, decide instead to destroy? Many believed Traoré's rise had disrupted the old balance. Under him, the era of quiet deals with foreign partners had ended. The age of external hand-holding was over. He spoke of sovereignty, not survival, of production, not dependence. To some, it was liberation, but to others, especially those who had benefited from the previous system, it was dangerous. Traoré was cutting off the oxygen of the elite, and in doing so, he created enemies not only abroad but also inside his military uniform. Some of these men were once decorated, others forgotten, but they found each other in their discontent. They built something underground, a new alliance, not for the people, but for their return to control. They moved quietly, they recruited smarter, and they waited, because they knew that the closer you are to power, the easier it is to unmake it, and that's what made their plans so lethal. This wasn't a chaotic rebellion. This was an operation crafted from the inside, a betrayal hidden in plain sight. But how do you coordinate something so precise without being seen? The answer lies not in the men themselves, but in the networks they used, and the people they reached out to next. Because these 6 weren't just soldiers, they were builders of something darker, something that reached into the country's most sacred spaces, not with bullets, but with belief. And that's where we go next. Let's pause for a second to say big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. In the rural heartlands, where modern institutions haven't yet replaced traditional structures, chiefs, imams, pastors, griots, and spirit mediums still hold more influence than ministers. These are the voices people follow when they're told not to believe the state. These are the hands that can stir calm into chaos, or peace into panic. The conspirators knew this. That's why, as the coup plans were being drawn, messages were already being passed to key religious and traditional figures across the country. Not threats, not orders, whispers, promises, appeals cloaked in righteous language. They weren't asking these leaders to pick up guns. They were asking them to plant seeds of doubt, to question the government's legitimacy, to speak of dissatisfaction, to soften the ground for rebellion, using sermons and ancestral memory. It was psychological warfare at its most precise. Some leaders resisted, others listened. A few, according to confidential intelligence files, agreed to act as quiet bridges between military plotters and local communities. In regions already scarred by economic hardship, insecurity, or feelings of neglect, these messages found an audience. Not everyone wanted to betray the nation, but plenty were willing to believe that the capital had betrayed them first. That was the genius and the horror of this layer of the plan. The plotters didn't want to conquer Burkina Faso by fire. They wanted the people to open the gates for them. And the tool they used wasn't ideology, it was faith. It's important to understand how fragile the line is between spiritual leadership and political influence in many parts of Burkina Faso. An imam's word can still decide a village's vote. A chief's silence can legitimize rebellion. A griot's song can turn rumor into history. And the plotters intended to weaponize all of it. This approach also had another function. Camouflage. Military mobilization can be detected. Weapons shipments can be tracked. But sermons, conversations in shrines, counsel given during funerals or naming ceremonies? That's harder to monitor. It gave the plot a cloak of cultural legitimacy, even as it moved closer to treason. The deeper implication is chilling. If this layer of the operation had succeeded, the coup would not have looked like a coup. It would have looked like a popular uprising, blessed by ancestral spirits and justified by moral outrage. Traoré wouldn't have been toppled by generals. He would have been denounced by tradition itself. And that's the danger Burkina Faso now faces. Not just bullets, but beliefs used as blades. In a time when many African countries are rediscovering the strength of their traditions, the line between cultural revival and spiritual manipulation is thin. And the coup plotters walked it expertly. The question now is, who helped them? Were there spiritual leaders who willingly aligned themselves with this mission? Were their religious networks exploited without their knowledge? Or were some simply deceived, tricked into thinking they were defending the nation, when in reality, they were paving the way for its undoing? Investigations are ongoing, but one truth is clear. The battlefield has expanded. It's no longer just in army bases and presidential halls. It's in sermons, rituals, and public memory. And if the conspirators were willing to twist faith to serve their goals, what else, or who else were they willing to work with? The answer, it turns out, is even more dangerous. Because as the intelligence services dug deeper, they found a link between these internal saboteurs and forces far outside the country's borders, not just in another nation, but among the very groups Traoré had sworn to eradicate. And that takes us to the next dark chapter of this story. As Burkina Faso's intelligence units dug deeper, they began to uncover a chilling possibility. Some of the coup plotters were not just working alone, they were in contact with insurgent organizations. For Captain Ibrahim Traoré, this revelation didn't just raise the stakes, it reframed the entire event. It wasn't simply a military mutiny or an ideological rebellion. It was, in essence, an alliance between uniformed traitors and ununiformed butchers, a convergence of ambition and anarchy. That's the terrifying reality of warfare in the Sahel today. The borders between formal institutions and insurgent movements are no longer rigid. When money, weapons, and power are in play, even the cleanest uniforms can shake hands with the dirtiest intentions. Security officials revealed that intercepted communications, encrypted voice messages, suspicious financial transactions, irregular movement patterns painted a disturbing picture. Some of the 6 men had been in direct or indirect communication with figures linked to insurgent groups operating in the northern and eastern regions of Burkina Faso, where militias have carved out bloody footholds over the last decade. The content of these exchanges wasn't always explicit, but the pattern was unmistakable. Military defectors and violent insurgents circling each other like vultures, each seeing the other as a means to an end. The plotters had inside knowledge. The militants had muscle. One needed access, the other needed an opportunity. And in the middle stood the state, unsuspecting, surrounded. What may have drawn the two camps together was a shared enemy, Traoré. The coup plotters saw him as the man who broke their grip on power. The insurgents saw him as the leader who refused to negotiate, who doubled down on counterinsurgency, who dared to purge foreign-backed anti-insurgent programs and replace them with an indigenous strategy. To both camps, Traoré had disrupted the game, so they found a way to reset it. These weren't official alliances sealed in a bunker. These were tactical understandings, whispered and plausible denied. A commander who overlooks a checkpoint, a lieutenant who reroutes patrol schedules, a captain who ensures a certain convoy never reaches its destination. This is how insurgents thrive, not just through violence, but through quiet handshakes and favors passed behind the curtain of official protocol. But perhaps the most horrifying possibility is this. What if the coup had succeeded? What would have happened next? Would the insurgents have respected the new regime? Or would they have seen it as a new playground? With military command fractured and trust disintegrated, it's not hard to imagine what could have followed. A civil implosion, territorial collapse, and an insurgent advance toward Ouagadougou itself. And let's not forget, many of these groups don't just want influence, they want dominion. They don't operate under constitutions. They don't respect borders. They aren't interested in co-governing. Their goal is to dismantle state structures entirely and replace them with rule by fear, faith, and force. For them, the coup wasn't a threat. It was a doorway. That's why this conspiracy wasn't just internal treason. It was strategic sabotage that could have set off a chain reaction across the Sahel. Mali and Niger would have seen a weakened ally. The AES alliance would have lost its linchpin. And most importantly, Burkina Faso's shift toward regional self-determination would have been smothered before it could inspire more countries to follow. And while 5 of the plotters have been exposed, captured, or identified, the networks they touched, the contacts they cultivated, are still out there. In the hills, in the shadows, in some cases, in plain sight. Which raises an even more urgent question. Where did this plot begin? And more importantly, who sheltered it? The answer, authorities believe, leads across the border, into a country that's now under quiet scrutiny. Because 2 of the accused weren't just planning in secret, they were planning from abroad. And that takes us directly into the next storm. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Every coup has its staging ground. Every rebellion has a refuge. And for this failed attempt in Burkina Faso, that location wasn't some isolated jungle camp or hidden tunnel. It was allegedly a foreign capital, Abidjan, the glittering cityscape of Côte d'Ivoire. As intelligence reports unraveled the architecture of the coup plot, a disturbing detail emerged. At least 2 of the 6 accused conspirators, Lieutenant Abdrahmane Barry and Officer Kabor Constantine, were not even in Burkina Faso when the operation was being coordinated. They were in Abidjan, not hiding in caves or bunkers, but living in open view, likely with support networks and access to communications tools far outside the reach of Burkinabe law enforcement. This wasn't a case of exiled opposition plotting from afar. These were trained military men, one of them a high-ranking justice officer, actively working on plans to unseat a sovereign government. And they weren't in exile, they were operating. And that revelation has now triggered one of the most tense diplomatic dilemmas in West Africa. The question isn't just why these men were in Côte d'Ivoire, it's what they were able to do there, and more dangerously, what was allowed to happen around them. Did they have help? Were local authorities aware? Were elements within Ivorian institutions complicit, or at the very least, turning a blind eye? Officially, Côte d'Ivoire has remained silent. No government statements, no joint press conferences, no visible steps toward extradition. And that silence is growing louder by the day. But inside Burkina Faso's corridors of power, the mood is shifting. Quiet outrage is beginning to boil into something else: strategic distrust. In private meetings, senior Burkinabe officials have reportedly questioned how 2 fugitives managed to plan subversive operations under the nose of a friendly neighbor. After all, Côte d'Ivoire and Burkina Faso have long maintained diplomatic relations, regional trade ties, and shared counterinsurgency concerns. But now, there are shadows over those ties. Because this isn't just about fugitives finding shelter. It's about foreign soil potentially being used to destabilize a nation that's already under siege. And that leads to even more unsettling questions. Were these plotters operating alone in Abidjan, or were there sympathizers, political, military, or private, who offered protection? Was this city a neutral ground or a launch pad? More alarmingly, if two coup plotters could organize from Ivorian territory, who else is doing the same, unnoticed, unchecked, and unchallenged? Burkina Faso's military intelligence is now said to be tracking multiple communication threads, leading back not just to individuals, but to networks of influence operating across West African capitals, from Abidjan to Accra, from Dakar to Lomé. Some are ideological, others are commercial. All share one interest: halting the rise of Traoré's Pan-African revolution before it becomes irreversible. What makes the Côte d'Ivoire link so provocative is that it has the potential to reshape the geopolitical map of the region. If proven true, if it turns out that a neighboring country knowingly harbored plotters, it could deepen AES's suspicion of outside powers and even force a realignment of regional security partnerships. And this is not happening in a vacuum. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have already begun charting a new course with their alliance of Sahel states, breaking ties with France, rejecting Western military operations, and promoting intra-African defense and development. That pivot has made them targets for diplomatic pressure, economic sanctions, and even covert destabilization efforts. So, when two coup plotters are found planning from a regional capital like Abidjan, it's not just an intelligence matter, it's a lit match hovering over an already dry forest of diplomatic tension. Captain Traoré, so far, has resisted escalating the issue publicly, but insiders say Burkina Faso has already opened discreet channels to demand clarity and possibly extradition. The pressure is on Côte d'Ivoire to prove that it is not a breeding ground for counter-revolutionary operations. But the truth is, even if the government in Abidjan wasn't involved, the fact that its territory became a safe space for insurgent planning is itself a serious breach of regional trust. And trust, once broken in a volatile region like this, can turn very quickly into confrontation. So now the stakes grow beyond just punishing traitors. They grow into a diplomatic showdown, one that could redefine alliances and redraw the lines between friend and foe. And through it all, one man remains notably silent: Captain Wedrao René David, the only plotter still missing. Because while diplomats argue and states deflect, he's still out there, somewhere. As the dust settles and the embers of betrayal cool, Captain Ibrahim Traoré is not claiming victory. He's not declaring that the danger has passed. Instead, he's doing something far more strategic. He's turning a near-death experience into a moment of national reckoning. For most leaders, a foiled coup brings immediate purges, mass arrests, televised trials, and sweeping military reassignments. But Traoré, shaped by the battlefield rather than the boardroom, has taken a more precise approach, not slower, sharper. Because he understands something many outside observers miss: this coup was never just a plot. It was a symptom of an old disease that still lingers in Burkina Faso's veins. And to treat it, he's not just hunting traitors, he's reshaping the system that made them possible. The first thing he did was tighten the chain of command. In recent weeks, Traoré's administration has launched a quiet restructuring of key military units, particularly those linked to intelligence, internal defense, and counterinsurgency. But unlike past regimes that shuffled generals like playing cards, Traoré is digging deeper, evaluating loyalty, ideology, and regional alignment. He's no longer content with having soldiers who follow orders. He wants a force that believes in the national project. That means removing not just conspirators, but those who tolerated their rise. Simultaneously, he has begun overhauling Burkina Faso's domestic security doctrine, including reforms to how the state engages with religious institutions and traditional leadership circles. After the coup attempt revealed how faith could be exploited, Traoré isn't moving against religion. He's fortifying it. Trusted spiritual leaders are now being brought into state dialogues, not as puppets, but as allies in safeguarding national unity. The goal is clear: no more spiritual loopholes for political subversion. But Traoré's response isn't just institutional, it's symbolic. In the weeks after the failed coup, he made several unannounced visits to remote military bases and high-risk communities. No cameras, no rehearsed speeches, just a man in uniform, walking through places where bullets outnumber books. According to those close to him, Traoré believes the real war is not fought in palaces or on paper, but in places where the state has been absent for too long. Places where a whisper from an insurgent or a rumor from a deserter can carry more weight than a law from the capital. So, he's filling that silence with presence, and more importantly, with promises backed by visible action. Roads being laid, irrigation systems expanding, vocational centers being built. Because Traoré understands what many of his enemies underestimated: you don't kill a revolution with bullets, and you don't protect it with fear. You protect it with results. But perhaps the boldest part of Traoré's counterstrike isn't domestic, it's regional. Instead of retreating into isolation, he's using the failed coup to deepen strategic ties with Mali and Niger, accelerating the integration of the alliance of Sahel states. What began as a military pact is now evolving into something much broader: shared trade routes, joint infrastructure projects, and even early discussions around a new regional financial framework. Traoré's message is clear: you tried to break us apart. We'll respond by fusing even tighter. The game has changed. The masks have come off. Now, it's about finishing what he started. Not just defending Burkina Faso, but rebuilding it into a nation where betrayal cannot breathe. And soon, all plotters and potential plotters will be behind bars. Do you think any attempt to make Burkina Faso weak ends up making it stronger? Let us know in the comment section. Is it possible to defeat Traoré? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.